I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless, en masse. And it really felt like, oh, this is a really clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore.
At 64, Jim Carrey has nothing left to lose. He just dropped his blacklist of 6 powerful names who turned his career into a living hell. And it's the story Hollywood has tried to silence for decades. Before this gets taken down, discover the brutal, behind-the-scenes stories no one else dared to tell. Are you brave enough to handle the truth? A legacy of laughter and depth. For generations of moviegoers, Jim Carrey is more than just an actor. He is an indelible icon of modern cinema whose impact is difficult to overstate. In the single, explosive year of 1994, he detonated a cultural bomb with the release of 3 monumental comedies: Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. These films did not just make people laugh, they fundamentally redefined the possibilities of physical comedy, proving that a human being could be as expressive and elastic as a classic cartoon character. However, just as the world was ready to permanently cast him as the lovable buffoon, Carrey executed a stunning pivot. He began to prove that his talent had a profound and serious depth, taking on complex dramatic roles that challenged both himself and his audience. His performances in films like The Truman Show in 1998, Man on the Moon in 1999, and the critically acclaimed Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in 2004 revealed the soul of a true artist. He showed the world that behind the manic energy was a deeply sensitive and intelligent man, grappling with immense questions about identity, reality, and the human condition. But even a man whose mission was to bring joy to the world has his limits. In what can be seen as his final, most honest reflection, Carrey has identified 6 individuals whom he found to be toxic, consumed by ego, fundamentally inauthentic, or spiritually empty. These were the people who, in his view, violated the unspoken code by which he lives and creates. The question then arises, who are these people, and what truly transpired behind the carefully constructed facade of Hollywood productions? What did these conflicts, hidden from the public eye, reveal about the true price of fame, the pervasive illusion of the entertainment industry, and the lonely struggle to maintain artistic integrity in a world that so often rewards the opposite? The foundation: Jim Carrey's unbreakable philosophy. To truly understand why these specific conflicts left such a lasting mark on Jim Carrey, one must first understand the core of the man himself. His personality can be described as a magnetic and chaotic storm, driven by a fierce, almost religious devotion to authenticity. Throughout his entire life and career, he has been obsessed with the search for truth. Whether it was the truth behind the masks we all wear in society, the emotional truth of a character, or the ultimate truth behind the public persona known as Jim Carrey. His journey was forged in hardship, a beginning that was far from the glamour he would later experience. Born into a financially struggling family in Canada, he endured a period of profound poverty after his father lost his job, which forced the family to live out of a van. This early experience with instability and loss instilled in him a powerful will to succeed and a deep-seated suspicion of superficial security. He began his career on the grueling circuit of stand-up comedy clubs, where he honed his incredible improvisational skills and his unique ability to connect with an audience on a primal level. His breakout role on the sketch comedy show In Living Color introduced his explosive energy to a wider audience, but it was the cinematic explosion of 1994 that turned him into arguably the biggest movie star on the planet. Yet, the dizzying heights of fame brought him no lasting satisfaction. Instead, he felt a pull towards more dramatic roles, not as a cynical ploy to win awards, but as a genuine need to explore the darker, more complex corners of human experience and find a deeper meaning in his work. The defining moment of this journey, the experience that would crystallize his entire philosophy, was his portrayal of the late avant-garde comedian Andy Kaufman in the 1999 film Man on the Moon. The subsequent 2017 documentary, Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, laid bare the shocking extent of his commitment. Jim did not simply act like Andy Kaufman. For the duration of the shoot, he became Andy Kaufman. He insisted on being called Andy on set, never breaking character, antagonizing his co-stars and the crew, and pushing the entire production to the brink of chaos. He did this not out of ego, but out of a profound belief that it was the only way to honor the spirit of Kaufman, an artist who dedicated his life to blurring the lines between performance and reality. From this crucible of experience, Jim Carrey's core philosophy was forged. It became an unspoken code of conduct, a set of principles that guided his every artistic choice. This code dictated, first and foremost, that acting must be an act of living truthfully, not of pretending. He believed an actor had a duty to bring their soul, their vulnerability, and even their madness into a role, because to do anything less was to cheat the audience. Secondly, his code demanded an absolute rejection of artificiality, ego, and the hollow pursuit of fame. He developed a deep disdain for those who used acting merely to construct a public image, valuing a polished exterior over genuine emotional depth. The central tenet of his code was to bring both chaos and truth to every project. He believed in never phoning in a performance, never hiding behind a safe, polished mask. In his view, if you were not willing to completely lose yourself, to risk making a total fool of yourself for the sake of art, then you had no business being there in the first place. He became famous for this method, staying in character for extended periods, improvising wildly in ways that often terrified his co-stars, and openly criticizing the celebrity culture he found so toxic. When this sacred code was broken by others, whether through excessive seriousness, unchecked ego, blatant phoniness, or a simple lack of soul, Jim Carrey never forgot. And now, he is telling the stories. The list: 6 encounters with inauthenticity. 1. Tommy Lee Jones, the collision of chaos and rigidity. This conflict is perhaps the most famous and publicly documented clash of Jim Carrey's career, a perfect storm of opposing artistic temperaments. The setting was the massive 1995 production of Batman Forever. Carrey, then at the absolute peak of his comedic stardom, was cast as the hyperactive villain, the Riddler. Cast opposite him as the menacing Two-Face was Tommy Lee Jones, a revered, classically trained dramatic actor who had just won an Academy Award for his performance in The Fugitive. As the film's primary antagonists, they were slated to share significant screen time. The source of the conflict was immediate and irreconcilable. Tommy Lee Jones, a man who approached his craft with a stern, old-school seriousness, found Carrey's working style to be utterly intolerable. He viewed Carrey's constant improvisation, his relentless energy, and his on-set antics not as a creative process, but as pure buffoonery. He saw it as unprofessional, undisciplined, and an insult to the craft of acting. Carrey's code of bringing chaos to the table ran headfirst into Jones's unbreachable wall of serious and orderly professionalism. Carrey himself recounted the most painful moment of this conflict in a candid interview with Howard Stern. The incident occurred just before they were to film a crucial scene together. Carrey spotted Jones at a restaurant and went over to greet him cheerfully. Jones, however, looked up with a face of stone, began to shake with what seemed to be rage, and told Carrey directly, "I hate you. I really don't like you." When a stunned Carrey asked why, Jones delivered a line that would become infamous. "I cannot sanction your buffoonery." The tension on set was reportedly even worse. Sources claimed that Jones demanded his dressing room be moved as far away from Carrey's as possible, and that he refused to participate in joint rehearsals, only interacting with Carrey when the cameras were rolling. For Carrey, the experience was deeply hurtful. He had genuinely admired Tommy Lee Jones as a formidable actor, but this confrontation revealed a side of the industry he found disheartening: a rigid conservatism, an inability to embrace a different, more joyful, and chaotic form of creative energy. This was more than a personality clash. It was a fundamental war between two opposing artistic philosophies. It was the irresistible force of comedic anarchy meeting the immovable object of dramatic method. From this, Carrey learned that some figures in Hollywood take themselves and their art so seriously that they forget that joy, playfulness, and freedom are essential ingredients of creation. 2. Will Smith. The slap that exposed a hypocritical core. The conflict between Jim Carrey and Will Smith did not unfold on a film set, but on the world's most watched stage, the Academy Awards, in a moment that sent shockwaves through the industry. The event was the 94th Academy Awards ceremony on March 27, 2022. Comedian Chris Rock was on stage when he made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head. In response, her husband, Will Smith, walked onto the stage and slapped Chris Rock across the face in front of a stunned audience and millions of viewers at home. A short time later, Smith won the award for Best Actor and was met with a standing ovation from many of the attendees. For Jim Carrey, this entire sequence of events was a nauseating display of everything he despised about modern Hollywood: rampant hypocrisy, an out-of-control ego, and a disturbing tolerance for violence when perpetrated by one of its own. Carrey's core principle of living truthfully was violated by an act of aggression that was performed by a man who had built a global brand on being a nice guy, an act that was then immediately excused and celebrated by an entire industry. In an interview with CBS Mornings just days later, Carrey did not hold back his disgust. "I was sickened," he stated plainly. "I was sickened by the standing ovation." He went on to call the Hollywood crowd spineless for their reaction. He then added a sharp, pointed hypothetical. "I'd have announced this morning that I was suing Will for $200 million because that video is going to be there forever. It's going to be ubiquitous. That insult is going to last a very long time." Carrey's criticism was aimed at Smith's decision to sully everyone's shining moment by making the evening about his own personal grievance, thereby hijacking a celebration of art with an act of public violence. Carrey's perspective was not just an attack on Smith the individual, but on the powerful illusion he represented. Will Smith had spent decades carefully cultivating a public image of positivity, charm, and professionalism. In Carrey's eyes, the slap was the moment the mask fell off, revealing a fragile ego and a violent impulse beneath the polished surface. What disgusted Carrey even more was the industry's reaction. The standing ovation sent a clear message: if you are powerful and famous enough, you will be forgiven for anything. This incident confirmed Carrey's long-held belief that fame is a corrupting influence and that true authenticity is a rare and endangered commodity in Tinseltown. 3. Shia LaBeouf. The war between two kinds of intensity. This conflict is particularly fascinating because it involves two actors who are both renowned for their intense and often controversial approaches to their craft. The context was the early 2000s, a period when Shia LaBeouf was in a very public rebellious phase, generating headlines for everything from plagiarizing a short film to engaging in bizarre performance art. He was also cultivating a reputation for an extreme form of method acting that was deeply immersive for him, but often deeply unpleasant for his co-workers. The root of the conflict was a difference in perceived authenticity. Jim Carrey, who had pushed method acting to its absolute limits for Man on the Moon, looked at LaBeouf's antics and saw something different. He did not see a genuine artistic commitment, but rather a performative and overwrought display designed for public consumption and media attention. Carrey's rule of being true clashed with what he perceived as LaBeouf's act of performing truthfulness. The feud became public at the 2014 Golden Globe Awards. While presenting, Carrey made a pointed joke aimed at LaBeouf's recent plagiarism scandal, quoting a line and then adding, "I believe it was Shia LaBeouf who said that." The jab infuriated LaBeouf, who took to Twitter to launch a series of deeply personal attacks against Carrey, cruelly referencing his role as a father and his relationship with his daughter. This public spat revealed a simmering tension between two very different generations of intense actors. This confrontation was a unique case of one madman criticizing another. Carrey, having journeyed to the furthest edges of character immersion and successfully returned, seemed to see in LaBeouf a younger version of himself, but one lacking self-awareness. He may have felt that LaBeouf's extremism was not born from an internal artistic need to discover a character's truth, but from an external egotistical need to be perceived by the world as a serious and deep artist. It highlighted a subtle but crucial distinction: the difference between losing oneself for the sake of art and simply performing the act of losing oneself for the sake of an image. 4. Mark Wahlberg, the jester versus the tough guy. This name often appears on viral lists discussing Carrey's feuds, but the conflict with Mark Wahlberg is less about a specific incident and more about the symbolic clash between two opposing Hollywood archetypes. Carrey and Wahlberg have never worked together on a major film, making their opposition more ideological than personal, a reflection of a deep divide in star culture. The conflict arises from their fundamentally different personas and work ethics. Mark Wahlberg represents the quintessential Hollywood tough guy. He projects an image of discipline, hard work, and a no-nonsense blue-collar attitude. His approach to acting is that of a job to be done efficiently and professionally. This philosophy is the complete antithesis of Carrey's code of embracing chaos and unpredictability. If Wahlberg represents order, discipline, and control, Carrey represents the joyful disruption of all three. While there are no direct public criticisms between them, one can easily imagine the immense friction that would exist on a shared set. Carrey's style of relentless improvisation, of deconstructing the script to find spontaneous moments of truth, would inevitably clash with Wahlberg's more methodical, script-focused, and results-oriented approach. Carrey would likely view Wahlberg's brand of seriousness as emotionally restrictive, lacking in vulnerability, or overly concerned with maintaining a masculine image. Conversely, Wahlberg would almost certainly see Carrey's methods as undisciplined, unprofessional, and unreliable. This imagined conflict highlights a fundamental disagreement about the very definition of professionalism in acting. For Wahlberg and those like him, being a professional means showing up on time, knowing your lines, hitting your marks, and delivering a consistent performance. For Carrey, being a true professional means being willing to tear up the script, to risk spectacular failure, and to search for a spark of genuine human truth in the ensuing chaos, even if it makes everyone around you uncomfortable. Wahlberg represents the well-oiled Hollywood machine. Carrey represents the ghost in that machine, constantly trying to make it go off the rails. 5. Morgan Freeman, when the voice of God met a hurricane of energy. The dynamic between Jim Carrey and the legendary Morgan Freeman was less a direct conflict and more a testament to how Carrey's overwhelming energy could challenge even the most respected and unflappable figures in the industry. The two starred together in the 2003 blockbuster comedy Bruce Almighty, a film where Carrey's character is granted the powers of God, a role played by Freeman himself. The source of the tension was a simple clash of energies. Morgan Freeman is an actor celebrated for his calm, wise, and authoritative presence. His deep, measured voice and serene demeanor have made him the embodiment of control and wisdom. Working alongside Jim Carrey, a veritable hurricane of unpredictable energy, was a significant test of that serenity. Carrey's code of chaos was a direct challenge to Freeman's code of calm. A story often recounted from the set, whether apocryphal or not, perfectly captures this dynamic. When asked about the experience of working with Carrey, Freeman is said to have remarked, with a mixture of humor and exhaustion, "You better be ready, or he'll burn your soul." This single line encapsulates the essence of the challenge. Carrey's energy on set was boundless. He would improvise endlessly, trying countless variations of a scene, changing his lines, and constantly pushing his scene partners out of their comfort zones. For an actor like Freeman, whose method relies on quiet preparation and a deep understanding of the text, this process could be both artistically stimulating and profoundly exhausting. This was not a case of personal animosity, but a collision of professional frequencies. It was akin to placing a meditating monk in the middle of a heavy metal concert. Carrey often felt that some of the more serious legends of the industry were unable or unwilling to engage in his style of improvisational play. They wanted to stick to the script, which for them was the source of truth, whereas for Carrey, the script was merely a starting point to be exploded in search of a higher, more spontaneous truth. Their collaboration serves as proof that even the most patient and good-natured professionals could find themselves depleted by the sheer force of Jim Carrey's relentless creative spirit. 6. The Kardashians. The antithesis of authenticity. Jim Carrey's final target is not a single actor, but a media empire, a cultural phenomenon that represents the absolute pinnacle of everything he finds hollow and destructive in modern culture. The Kardashian-Jenner family built a global dynasty based on a reality television show, social media, and the monetization of their own curated lives. They are the very definition of being famous for being famous. This group represents a total violation of every principle in Carrey's philosophy. If Carrey's life's work is about finding the truth behind the mask, the Kardashian business model is about manufacturing, polishing, and selling the mask itself. If Carrey despises artificiality and hollow fame, those are the very currencies in which their empire trades. They symbolize a culture where every moment is curated for an audience, where life itself is scripted, and where genuine emotion is replaced by a performance of emotion for likes and engagement. Carrey has spoken out many times against the vapid nature of celebrity culture and reality television. He has discussed his own desire to kill the public persona of Jim Carrey to free himself from the burden of maintaining an image. His philosophical and often bizarre red carpet interviews are a form of protest against this culture. In one famous instance, when asked by a reporter why he was attending a Fashion Week party, he responded with a detached, existential monologue. "There's no meaning to any of this. I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to." Needy, this was a direct shot across the bow at the superficiality of Hollywood events, a world where the Kardashians reign as royalty. For Carrey, the Kardashians are not just people. They are a symptom of a cultural disease. They represent a spiritual emptiness, a world where a person's value is measured not by their talent, their character, or their depth, but by their level of public visibility. His silent war against them is a war against an ideology. The ideology that a life lived as a 24/7 performance for public consumption is a life to be admired. It is the ultimate betrayal of his most sacred rule. Take the mask off. Don't polish it for sale. The final truth of an unfiltered man. This list of 6 figures, when viewed through the lens of Jim Carrey's life, is not merely an exercise in settling old scores or airing petty grievances. It is the final, honest testament of an artist who has spent a lifetime wrestling with the concept of truth itself. Each name on the list represents a specific violation of his personal and artistic code. The rigid intolerance of Tommy Lee Jones, the violent ego of Will Smith, the performative intensity of Shia LaBeouf, the tough guy archetype of Mark Wahlberg, the tested patience of Morgan Freeman, and the soul-crushing artificiality of the Kardashian empire. All of these conflicts point back to the single unifying philosophy that has guided Jim Carrey through his tumultuous journey. He believes that the art of acting is not about putting on a mask, but about having the courage to tear it off. It is about living truthfully, embracing the madness, the pain, and the chaos that reside within all of us. Fame, in his worldview, is a dangerous illusion, a temporary construct of the ego. The only things that have real, lasting value are truth and genuine human connection. In a modern Hollywood that is increasingly sanitized, corporate-controlled, and managed by public relations teams and social media algorithms, Jim Carrey stands as one of the last truly unfiltered voices. He is a living reminder that the greatest art often emerges from the greatest risks, from a willingness to be vulnerable, and from the courage to make a complete fool of oneself in the service of telling a difficult truth. He has undoubtedly paid a professional and personal price for his unwavering honesty, but it is a currency he has never been willing to trade for acceptance.